Hey everybody, good day. So how are you all doing? I decided to do a more, I guess, central topic to get people familiar with the things that I've experienced with the Plejarens. So this will be the first part, and what I wanted to talk about was a lot of the questions about uh, the species or the people that I have met, and they're my family now, I guess is the way you would say it. And also some of the other species and how that works. Um, Most of you should know by now how I came to meet Sam Jess and how we got to know each other. And they weren't experienced. I'll just go over it shortly. They weren't real experienced. The people that I was meeting with contact. There are specific organizations within the Plejaren community and other species that do contact. And um, I'm giving you the broad story here rather than the specific like you can see in the other videos. They were just a lab group, and they weren't familiar with this. And due to the circumstance of how I met with Sam Jess and all, it was considered, something that was different and about this. And they wanted the they're all equal, but another branch basically that oversees the different lab ships decided that they should pursue this, and there was never any worry about safety or anything from them, only uh, me, I guess. But it was the way I am. Um, when I met Sam Jess, she was in an entanglement, let's say, and I thought that it was all out of it was weird because here I am in the middle of the swamp, and there's this beautiful person. She wasn't all dirty and stuff or sweaty, and she was tangled up, and nothing fit. But I just approached it because I was curious, right? And questioning my sanity and all. And then when I picked her up, I noticed how light she was. I didn't know at the time, but they can make themselves lighter or heavier, and at will. And it was in order to assist me to get her back to her ship. And then that first interaction was very quick. And the one thing I really noticed, other than thinking I might be out of my mind, was that um, her uniform, it was like a jumpsuit, and it felt actually like skin. And I didn't quite understand that, to find out later. It's kind of almost like a living entity in a sense, I guess, with limited capabilities, but the capabilities were for the comfort of the individual and safety. So, anyways, then I had another meeting with them, and it was really kind of funny because it's like I wasn't even expecting it, and I was just out in the swamp again, later another day, and I didn't have an intention of going back where I had taken her, where she was returned to her ship. And so as I got closer to the area, it was like, just kind of curious because it was a mound. And I didn't know at the time, but mounds are pretty common. And it has to do with the Native Americans that were there years ago, how they had like a shell pile in a sense. And I think it was their tools they would use. And then when they were done, they could discard them on this mound, and it created mounds. That's a layman's term, right? And it's a lot more detailed than that. But anyway, you get the idea. And I thought maybe I could see some tracks or something. There's panthers. There's all kinds of animals out in that area, and it was an open area, which was unusual out where I walked in. That was the first time I had ever seen that. So I went back there, and when I was back there, um, it was kind of odd. I wasn't even expecting it. And then suddenly this blue light, and I stepped into it, and boom, I was on the ship. And then it was actually kind of comical because I'm standing there and I'm seeing all of them there. Everybody that was on the ship, which is now my family. There was 3 men and 3 women, and they're standing there facing me. And I didn't know at the time, but I couldn't have, if I was a threat of any sort or something, I would have been neutralized immediately. But they were standing there, and every one of them just looked kind of odd. And the captain kind of explained to me that, the reason that um, I'm there is because their people felt that they should continue this if I wanted to, and we would see what happened. And so, because they weren't experienced, they had no idea what this contact even, you know, was really about. And other than that, they knew others did this, but it wasn't a real common thing. But so anyway, I decided to follow up on that, and or they decided to follow up on it, and so I'm standing there and I'm looking at each one of them. And, the first one's like the captain, and he's got this like sour face on him. Then there was Hans, and Hans is like the science guy. He didn't look like he wanted to look at me, right? And he didn't want to be there. And then there was Franz, and he was really shy, and he was kind of looking around too. And then he'd look up at me, and then, away again if I was looking at him. And then, all of them kind of sour faces. And then I get to the one I call Snake Lady, and she's looking at me, and her head's going like this, which is one of the reasons I named her Snake Lady. Okay, and it was kind of eerie to me, and she almost looked mad, right? And so then there was the next one, which was Laura, and Laura is just this really peaceful lady and stuff, and she was rather shy, and she really didn't have any intention of looking at me. And I'm getting this weird feeling, right, like I'm not wanted here. And then it comes to the very last person at the end, the one that I had helped, and it was Sam Jess. And she's standing there and she goes like this, waving. It's like finally it was like a relief because I was like, I was looking for an exit that wasn't there, right? And then when I saw Sam Jess, it was all good. And, so being with it, oh yeah, their eyes are a lot larger too. So you get the eyes and the intestine, the stomach, and that sort of thing. And, but what I discovered after a period of time was communication was really hard until I started to show them like video type things. And then another really difficult thing for me to do, once we got past that, we were able to communicate better. And again, I'm allergic to all languages, English being my second language, and I don't really have a first language. So you can imagine me trying to figure out how to pronounce the things that they say. And it almost sounds like kind of like a Mandarin because they sing kind of the tones. And so there was just no hope for me to try to communicate to them that way. But they all were able to understand English. They can pick up a language very quickly. And when I first met Sam Jess, she didn't know. But just from the conversation that we had from the time I found her to the time I took her back to her ship, they were able to start putting things together. And then they had other, I'm sure, library type access to, the language. And so that's how we started our communications. And, as time went on, I started to realize how very similar they are to us. And I mean, in all mannerism, they were not used to Z, right? Earthling, or whatever you want to call it. They weren't used to me or how most of us react to certain things. And so that was kind of comical, but they would adapt. And they actually enjoyed it. Over a period of time, I taught the handshake, right? And they seemed to really like that. And for all this is like the lab people are different than other parts of their populations. They're like more serious, more secluded, and so that was a little difficult for them to actually have physical contact. Humor was also a little different, and so I actually had to like tell them the joke and then explain the joke to them at first until they started really catching on quick. And then it got to the point where I taught a hug, and that became addictive to them. And so it got to the point where, I mean, every time I go to the ship now, it's like an hour just going through the family and having to hug each one of them, right? I mean, that's how they greet me now. And so, of course, there's the times for shaking hands and things like that. But for the most part, it's kind of comical. But the reactions that I've been noticing and have experienced with them is that they really are us in a lot of ways. And it's kind of a theory of mine, but I think I'm really close on it, and they haven't disagreed. Is that well, they're 5,000 years more advanced than us. Okay, so that's one, and that the way they explain things is they've kind of evolved to the point that they are now, and it stopped until they started to be interstellar in a sense, where they've evolved in several other ways, but not as significant as like the mind. And I think that's why we're so similar. Um, our brains, they have we use it all, right? Well, at least most of us do. But there's all this room for files, right? If you would think of it as a file cabinet up here. And so there's all this extra space. I mean, it's easy to understand when you think of like memories. Memories never end. They continually to compile these things right up until death, right? No matter how old you get, unless you start to lose the mind or whatever. But so there's all this extra space that we have in our minds. And when we see something like, these special things where people are like levitating or doing other special things, like one thing I'll get into later, but we see that as like magic, or we see it as disbelief and all these other things like psychic and moving through solid or matter, being able to move through that like a wall or something, right? So we see that as magic, but what it is that our brains have already evolved to the point that they're going to be. There's no more real evolving. I'm not a scientist or anything like that, so bear with me. If you can kind of picture this, you'll understand what I'm talking about. So in that case, we need to fill that brain with something more than just, we'll still evolve technologies and things like that, but it's all going to be based on what we already knew. So what you have to fill that with is love. And that's what starts to create what's called natural law, which is what beings like them and many others species out there have evolved to, which is called natural law, which there's an order to certain things. And in order to start to access that and understand it, one has to be able to fill their mind with love. Once you get the love thing going on inside the brain, magic actually becomes real. You'll start to see slowly cropping in abilities that you didn't have before. One of the things that is the key that they taught me to accessing the universe, I guess, is sensing. And sensing, I just kept repeating this because in my books I put the nuggets that I've learned, right? And it's up to you whether you resonate to it or not. And if you do, pay attention. And then the sensing, what you do is you find gratitude. All right. You don't need to set intents and things like that because you already know where you're there for, right? And it's going to come out and it's going to evolve. And if you try to explain it to yourself or repeat it to yourself, you're going to really limit it and confuse everything else that's attractive to your sensing. So you get into the sensing stage, and it's not really meditation, but it is that sort of thing. You find gratitude. All right. You find something that meant unconditional love to you sometime in your life, a memory or something, right? In other words, connect into that vibration or that frequency, because frequency is pretty much everything, once the energy is created, which is you, which I can go into that a long time also. But anyways, bear with me. So you get into that space, and one of my go-tos is the first time I rescued a little child. And what happens is because that was a changing point in my life where it created my passion for rescuing children. And, without rules or anything else associated to it. And it's one job, and the law is human law. So I have unconditional love for that moment, and I revisit it in my mind as when I've sat down and planned on a sensing, and I see it and I relive it over and over again in my mind to the point where it actually becomes real again. And it's so real that I see things that I didn't see before, and like wrinkles or something in a dress, or, a certain button somewhere, you get what I'm saying, the insignificant things, but it's actually that you're seeing more because our minds collect more than what we think we remember, right? And so anyway, you get into that point, and suddenly whatever it was that you were setting to sense starts to happen. And whether it be a person, that you're trying to communicate with, where it's beyond words, which I can get into later. I've learned so much from these people. It's amazing. But sometimes it's hard to distinguish what I've learned and what I've already had, right? And so anyways, when you get into that pure love, and your whole body frequency changes, and whatever it was that you wished to access, suddenly it's there. And whether it be healing, contacting somebody, contacting something else, which is one of the things that happened to me in the very beginning, and which is kind of funny. But anyway, so this is like the key to the brain, to where we evolve, and we start to become more conscious in a sense of what's required for us to move further forward in life, right? Or in the universe. And so that's like your first requirement. And many things come along with that. And since I'm talking about that, contact, from what I have learned, at least through them, is far different than what you've seen or heard people talk about. First of all, when I ask about humans being here, I mean aliens being here, and it's like they're everywhere. They're actually everywhere. We just don't recognize them. But I heard a guy talk one time years ago, before I even knew any of this, and he was talking about how, if you don't believe that, just park on a busy street corner somewhere, with a larger road and stuff, and watch the people that walk. Tell me you don't see something odd that stands out, and it's because you haven't really recognized or paid attention to it before. But they're all over. And one of the species that I've met actually lived here for 6 years, and they told me about that. So anyway, the idea of contact, like I hear so many times, oh, hopefully aliens will come and rescue all of us. Well, that has to do with kind of how we've evolved and how we'll get to that stage where we can be open to contact. Now, there are several species that are connected to like our governments and stuff like that, although it's more of a distraction than it is real contact. And they have like an exchange thing going on in the communication, which keeps them busy, right? If they need a part for something, right, and they'll give it to the military. The military will take it to one of their contractors who will make that part for them. And at that point, they have that technology. And that's kind of how you see so many things happening so fast now, since this all really began, because we are getting to have the capabilities slowly in order to do things that we could not have done it before. And these people know that. And so anyways, that's that. But now, the aliens aren't going to come and save us. There's so many different reasons for it. We have to save ourselves. And, if we die, that's okay. Even die out. Because what a lot of people don't understand is like Darwin's theory is not quite very accurate, I would say. The way they explained it to me, that the Plejarens themselves were part of our seeding. And how that worked was, if you can imagine a tree, right, and with the leaves on it, all right, so a species would drop to the ground and take off running, right, And they would last a little while until they died off, and then the next and the next, or multiples at the same time, until it got to the point where it was us, right, who actually survived. You know, there's been races that got to a certain point that weren't capable of surviving and went away. We went the farthest so far, and well, at least to my opinion. And we've gotten to a point where now where we start to move into the next steps, since our evolution of our minds has reached the peak, so to say. So the way contact, they explained to me, was, which they're the primary ones, is that people emit certain frequencies, right? And that was one of the things that happened when they met me. We're successful in some ways, but we're not successful in a lot of other ways. And one of the primary reasons for that was how I interacted with them in the beginning, because there's kind of a rule in order to be able to connect, be able to be with them. When I was there, what I've coined it naked. I had to be naked because you can't hide anything. You have to be absolute with them. You can't make things softer when you tell them, because you're afraid of their feelings or something like that. And I went through, it was quite a challenge for me to go through this, because I'm exactly opposite, in a sense, of what, or I was exactly what they would expect from a human, is to be being the lab people and stuff. They see us as violent and dangerous, right? And so that's why they were so hesitant in the beginning. And then when you go on the ship, each time you go onto the ship, your body's sort of scanned in order to make sure that you're safe to be there and be around. And they had noticed, like, the scars on me, and so many, and bullet holes and knife wounds, and so on and so forth. And so I had to, it's like, okay, I'm with these loving beings, and they're going to find out how violent my life has been and the choices that I made. And so I didn't want to lose them, but at the same time, I couldn't deny telling them. I had to be completely open about everything. And so it got to the point, long story short, I told them, I explained it to them, and I kind of think, okay, well, this is probably going to be my last day on the ship, and actually, I'm sitting there, and I get a coffee. Yeah, I got a coffee on the ship, and they called me out, and it was completely the opposite of what I had anticipated. And what it was they. I've been in churches before talking about the human trafficking and stuff, where preachers got together and they would do the lay on of hands, do prayers for you, and that sort of thing. And it was always rather emotional for me. And I don't know what it was, the energy or whatever it was, and the beauty of it, but it always affected me. And I hadn't felt that anywhere else before, the intensity anyway. And so when I'm with the Plejarens and this occurs, I get my coffee and they call me into the room. I'm thinking, yeah, this is where I get axed off the ship and never to see them again. And instead, they did like a very similar thing, where they placed their hands on me and their emotion came out of them. And I actually fell to my knees on the floor, and then I was breaking too, which was really weird for me. But I felt so much like everything had lifted from me, that I was accepted by this and by these people, no matter who I was, because I was not hiding from them. I wasn't interrogating them, asking them who did this and who did that, sort of thing. I was there to learn, and they were there to learn, and exchange and to love, right? To love each other. And so it was kind of mind blowing to me, how that all came to be. But I know that it's a requirement. And that's part of what natural law has intended, right? Just like in the contact, they'll be teaching these people with similar frequencies, such as the way I, reacted to them. I don't know what that is, right? But it's something about how that affects or is emanated from your head, the frequency. And so they've started to collect these people little kids mostly. I ask them, can I be a contactee? I really want to be a contactee because I want to learn all this stuff, right? But they say, no, you can't. You're too old. But I still get these little bits. I call them nuggets, and that's what I put in the books. And anyway, these kids that they select, they teach, and they teach them natural law. And that's a very general word, of course. But what it is these teachings like sensing, for example, and other ways to see things and how to create the energies, the fields that are around you. Some would call it an aura, but unless you experience it, then you probably don't know exactly what auras or your etheric body um, um, makes, right? Anyway, skipping forward. Anyways, they're teaching these kids. What they'll do is they collect these kids, they teach them, they send them back. The things that they learn are this magic, right? And they embed it with their actual person. You may have heard stories about these kids that do these miraculous things, but not all of them, but some of them. Like there's this one that can walk by dead flowers and they become alive again, and they don't even try. It's just because of the energy that they emit from their bodies. And people will notice these people as they grow. They're not allowed to become teachers. They're not allowed to show people things, things like that. But they are to be an example because the things that they emit are positive. Positive attracts, negative repels. You can think about that one and see how the world's working right now, right? So anyway, it's kind of like the 100th monkey. So all these contactees, these kids that they're teaching, that as they grow up over the next 50 years, people that see it start to emulate them because of the positivity and the feelings that they receive from the way they do certain things, right? And so eventually the hope is that 50 years or so, the consciousness of people will be more natural law, are following the natural law. And then the governments and everything else, the ones who seek power and so forth, won't be able to create it in such ways anymore. And that when it becomes big enough, that will enable us or be prepared for contact. The thing is like there's been so many stories I've seen that represent this about how, the aliens come in and they fix all this stuff. Well, we're not ready for that in any possible way because somebody will take it and make it a weapon or take it and try to profit from it. And see, that's what will be self-destructive to the entire world. So that can't happen until we're prepared consciously. And again, it's so simple. It's start to fill the rest of the brain with love, which prevents you from going in the other direction. And I'm not saying that, like, it's just like when I go on ship, I'm completely naked, right? And love, right? And when I come here, back here, I have to flip this switch, right? Because if I don't, I'll get eaten alive down here. You can get into these new age groups and they say, oh, love and light and all this stuff. And well, that's great, but you make it work until there's enough people or that you're around enough people where you can be complete in that sense. And that is, you hold absolutely nothing back. And that's sort of close to impossible today, right? And you have to have a different face for each person that you speak with. But you can still grow within yourself in that direction. And you'll be attracted more to those people that are more like. And then you'll be able to gauge how far can you go in that direction with them. Because it's kind of like, the simplest explanation. Everything comes to the simplest explanation. But, it's like these people that have all these friends and, and they think that, they believe that they're unconditional friends until they're in need. You find out real fast how many unconditional friends that you really have. Because, who's going to help? Who's going to put the hand out? Most people are just going to find, I've heard this story over and over and over again all my life, and that is, that finally they get to a point where they need some help. They go to a person. It's like there's always an excuse, or you can you can stay here for a couple of days, but then you need to get on, or so on and so forth. Nothing's unconditional, and so anyway, that's the whole point behind contact. And so yeah, if you think about it, that's the only way that it can actually work. So, oh, and then to get back to the food, this is kind of cool stuff. When I'm on the ship, at any time I'm hungry, I can get this food, and I have my own menu. Everybody has their own menu on there. If they have different species or something, but most of them are the same. That's how I got to have coffee on the ship. So it was part of my menu. But now the captain and Hans is addicted to it, so that's pretty cool. But it's the best coffee ever. Okay, so it's this. There was this, or you can go to the wall and you hit your menu, and outside the wall, comes your food. Well, you can get these like pellets or little great balls or whatever. And say I ordered steak, right? And it's very not appetizing to see these little great balls, right? But you put it in your mouth, and the texture, everything becomes as though you were eating the real thing, right? Which it is actually the real thing. And that's a whole nother story too. It's not conscious. So when you can't tell the difference, but I can also order it as what we would see, right? It looks just like a steak and everything, and it actually is. When I was on one of the colonies, which is really cool stuff too, they showed me the whole food process and everything. But just to keep the story straight for this one, we went to this place, and see, there's no pay, there's no money, no monetary system, and people follow natural law, which I guess I'm going to have to get into probably in the next one. But and that answers a lot of questions. We went to this like restaurant where these people just really enjoy creating the food, making it like a chef would, right? And so you can go in there and order your meal. You can make it look real, or you can, anywhere in the place you can pick out the great balls. But to go there, you're looking for a specific experience. And these people just crave doing this sort of thing. And so anyways, we go in there, and I'm just astounded. They got steak and lobster, and I couldn't tell the difference. And I'm thinking, do they harvest lobsters, or how do they get the meat, and that sort of thing? And so then also the person that was with me, she was wearing what looked like leather boots, almost like moccasins, and rawhide, and I'm going, you got to tell me. I said, is that, from the skin of an animal? And she sort of said, yeah, it is, but not the way you might think. They can grow it. They know how to grow the skin without the animal. And all they need is cells or something. I'm not a scientist or nothing, but they have found a way to grow it. And so then they can make these leather objects and stuff. And it's what I call it is without consciousness, because it's not coming from a live animal. It's just the skin is live. The same with the lobster tail. They make the lobster tail. They grow the lobster tail. And when I say grow, it's nearly instantaneous. And it's all how, that's created. And so the thing is that's very different is it's very, very clean, and it's so nutritious. I mean, it's like a boost. I mean, you eat this food, and I have a feeling that's a lot has to do with like their body figures. They're beautiful. All of them, the men and the women, they are just fit so perfectly. And I've also had the experience of eating some of their fruit, which contains all this other things in it. And it's just heaven. It just kind of like explodes in flavors in your mouth, and they're all, you just want them. I wanted to move to that lab and just live there and collect the fruit for people that they supply. But anyway, we'll get a lot more into that at a later. I think I'll hit on a couple other little things, and that is that these other species that I've met, it seems like there are many, many different species, right? But the ones that look like us, similar, not necessarily just like us. Now, what the Plejarens do, other than the really huge eyes, and their ears are a little different, but there are other species, that you would think of as grays or something, but they have 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, that sort of thing. Those type humanoid type aliens are collective in a sense out in space. They get along and they communicate, and there's a lot of bridges they have to cross in order for communication and everything. But once they reach a certain point of evolution, to say as they're interstellar, natural law becomes the about everything, and so it's not hard to communicate with them in that sense, and for everybody to respect each other and that sort of thing, because there is no, I've never seen anything that's been a problem from any of these species. It's movies. I also understand, like, here's an instance for that kind of ruins a lot of the theories and things, which I can go into in detail. But we can go out in the soil, collect a soil along a trail somewhere, and find DNA from species for 40 years, and we don't need a body in order to create things in their labs or stuff. All they need is the DNA, because it's real similar to how they do the birthing process, because they don't do sex for the most part. And I kind of understand why, because of how much love there is. But that's a whole nother world, right? A whole nother subject. But these different species, the humanoid types people, sort of are like a collective and work together in so many different ways. And then you have what I call bugs. These bugs, they're very, very different. I haven't seen a lot of them, but I've seen all I need to. They're really strange looking, and they actually look like bugs in a lot of different ways, and they're not humanoid. They're more like you would see an insect or something, but in a lot larger way. And their ability to communicate with the humanoid types peoples, most of them, the ones I know, and I'm very small speck in this whole thing, right? But from what I've seen is they don't communicate well, but with what they need to communicate to each other, they can. And again, it comes back to the natural law. It's how you have to follow that in order to evolve or expand or do whatever it is. And so you don't have people reaping planets and things like this, because it turns into a negative towards them and to others. And so the bug people, just, it's not a thing. And I haven't got to meet any. I've seen them, but I haven't got to meet any, and I don't need to. Especially because you can't really communicate with each other. And plus how evolved they are. There's also beings that are in energy, which is a whole nother thing, far removed from us already. But anyways, I thought I'd bring you up to date on that part, and I want to do a continuing series talking about, so many other things, about the pods, what it's like to fly a pod. And to understand, like these videos that you see from the military, why and how this is occurring, and the reasons for it, which is really fascinating. Also, there's the colonies, how they create colonies, and how different the people are in these colonies compared to like the people that I was associated with. And I started to get a general idea of what they were like, right, from this. And then suddenly I got the introduction into like a colony where there's, like you would call the regular people or stuff. Plus I've been to the planet. I've seen how they build their homes. God, there's so many things that's just unbelievable, that I've been able to experience, how they create electricity virtually for free. And here on Earth, when they made solar, the dirty solar with batteries and all that stuff, they had the same thing that they use, where they can create something about this big, and it would run a big store like Petco for 9.5 years, completely free, uninterrupted by weather, and so on and so forth. And it's not dirty. And there's no real part of manufacturing that is dirty either. It's just a vacuum and light. And so anyway, I'll go into all these other topics too later on. So anyways, better cut it off here. So now you know a little bit about the species and how it works with them. So All right, guys. See you next time. Bye.